My fourth grade geography teacher had one of those pull-down maps of the USA. You know, the kind where Alaska and Hawaii are in boxes in the corner. She taught us for the entire year that Alaska was a tropical island located somewhere off the coast of Mexico, next to Hawaii. It wasn't until a kid moved there and sent a postcard about the snow that she was forced to admit she might be wrong. I had a college professor who, after sending a scathing email meant for his department head to our entire 200-person lecture class, by mistake, panicked. He ran to the front of the room, yanked the power cable for the projector and monitor out of the wall and shouted, "It's okay, I stopped it!" He genuinely believed that if his screen went black, the email would be recalled from our inboxes. My home economics teacher burned a tray of cookies so badly that they set off the fire alarm. As the school was evacuating, she stood at the classroom door and handed every single one of us a detention slip for disrupting class, even though she was the one who caused the entire incident. She claimed we distracted her by breathing too loudly. My high school biology teacher was convinced that dolphins were a type of gay shark because they were so friendly and smooth. He was not joking. He said real sharks were aggressive and straight, while dolphins were their fabulous smiling cousins. We had to write a full one-page report on his theory, and he marked us down if we used any actual science. In a university computer science class, the professor couldn't get his code to work on the projector. He spent 20 minutes getting angrier and angrier, slamming his keyboard. Finally, a student went up and pointed out that he had been trying to write Python code in Microsoft Word. He had the wrong program open the entire time. He just silently switched windows and continued without acknowledging it. My history teacher had a strict no bathroom policy. A student raised his hand and said he was going to be sick. The teacher said, "I don't care, you can wait." Not 2 minutes later, the kid projectile vomited all over his desk and the floor. The teacher then had the nerve to give the kid a detention for making a mess during instructional time. My English literature professor failed half the class on our final paper about Moby Dick. His reasoning? We all made the amateur mistake of saying the whale was white. He insisted, based on the cover of his personal copy of the book, that the whale was clearly light grey and that whiteness was just a metaphor. He wouldn't even listen when we showed him the direct quotes. I had a math teacher who didn't understand daylight saving time. The Monday after the clocks fell back, she came into class an hour late, furious, insisting that the school's clock system was broken. She argued with the principal in front of our class, claiming it was a conspiracy to make her look bad and that they can't just steal time from the morning like that. A substitute teacher we had was a sweet old lady who was incredibly gullible. One of the class clowns told her his name was Anita Bath. She called on him all day. "Anita, do you have the answer? Anita, please be quiet." We all played along. The best part was when she left a note for the regular teacher that said, "Your student Anita Bath was a real pleasure to have in class." My physics professor once tried to demonstrate inertia by pulling a tablecloth out from under a set of dishes. He failed spectacularly. A glass of water, a plate, and a bowl of grapes went flying and smashed on the floor. Without missing a beat, he turned to us and said, "And that is a perfect example of gravity. Note the constant acceleration." We had a teacher who was deathly afraid of technology. To take a screenshot for her master's degree class, she would take a picture of her computer screen with a disposable camera, get it developed at Walmart, and then scan the printed photo. This was her legitimate multi-step process for capturing what was on her screen. My history teacher in 10th grade was teaching us about the Cold War. He said, with a completely straight face, that the conflict was between the United States and Canada over who had control of the world's maple syrup supply. He even drew a little maple leaf on the board as the symbol for the Canadian Empire. He was not a sub. My university professor for a film studies class gave everyone an F on their first assignment. The task was to analyse a silent film. His reasoning was that nobody in their essays mentioned the subtle but brilliant dialogue. He was convinced silent films had quiet, whispered dialogue that you could only hear if you paid very close attention in the library's viewing booths. A gym teacher once told our class that if you ever get chased by a bear, you should run downhill. His logic was that bears' front legs are shorter than their back legs, so they are physically incapable of running downhill and would just tumble over like a furry slinky. He presented this as a life-saving fact. I had an art teacher who believed that the colour yellow did not exist before the year 1850. She claimed it was invented by Vincent van Gogh, and that anything from before that time period which appeared yellow, like a banana or the sun in an old painting, was actually a faded form of orange or a trick of the light. My music teacher couldn't read music at all. He would just play songs for us on a CD player and have us write down how the music made us feel. When it came time for our practical exam on the recorder, he just gave everyone an A if they blew into it for at least 30 seconds, regardless of what came out. A professor once tried to use a laser pointer on an LCD screen. He kept clicking it and getting frustrated that the little red dot wasn't appearing. He ended up calling the IT department mid-lecture to complain that their screen was laser-proof. The IT guy had to come in and explain to a PhD-holding adult how light emission works. My chemistry teacher stored his lunch in the chemical storage fridge. One day he walked into class eating a sandwich and suddenly stopped, looking confused. He had accidentally spread a non-toxic but incredibly foul-smelling chemical paste on his bread instead of the mayonnaise he had brought. His face was priceless. A creative writing professor gave me a 0 on a short story because it featured a talking dog. She wrote on the paper, "This is completely unrealistic. Dogs cannot talk. You need to base your fiction in reality." The next week, she praised a student's story about a vampire who rode a unicorn to the moon. My Spanish teacher genuinely did not know much Spanish. We found out because a native-speaking student from a foreign exchange program corrected her pronunciation, and the teacher gave him detention for being disruptive and showing off. For the rest of the year, he would just answer her in flawless Spanish, and she'd just nervously smile and say, "Sí, muy bien." I had a health teacher who taught us that if you drink a glass of water after eating a bag of chips, the water cancels out all the salt and fat, making it a healthy snack. She called it the water eraser method. People in my class still bring this up, 15 years later. Some of them probably still believe it. A professor was livid that a student emailed him a question at 10 p.m. The next day in class, he went on a 15-minute rant about how we were not to email him after 5 p.m. because his computer was sleeping, and our emails would wake it up and tire it out for the next day. He thought his laptop needed a full 8 hours of rest. My French teacher insisted on an immersive classroom experience where we could only speak French. The problem was, she would often forget words. One time, she couldn't remember the word for book, livre, and just spent 5 minutes pointing at a textbook and yelling, le rectangle avec les papiers, in a panicked voice. We had a teacher who, when a student's phone would ring in class, would confiscate it, answer it, and have a full conversation with whoever was on the other end. She once had a 10-minute chat with a student's grandma about her gallbladder surgery, while the rest of us just sat there in silence. My philosophy professor started every single class by staring intently at a houseplant on his desk for 5 minutes. He told us he was absorbing its silent wisdom and that we should all learn to photosynthesize knowledge. He was also the department head. A high school science teacher tried to demonstrate a volcanic eruption with baking soda and vinegar. He used a massive container and poured an entire gallon of vinegar into a box of baking soda. The resulting foam explosion covered the first 3 rows of students, the ceiling, and his entire desk. He just stood there, dripping, and said, "See? Science." My economics professor was trying to explain supply and demand using the classroom as a market. He offered to sell his A-plus grading pen for $1. Nobody bought it. He then kept lowering the price until he was offering to pay someone to take it. He ended up giving a student $5 to take the pen, and then declared, "And that is how you stimulate a depressed market." A teacher once gave us all a pop quiz. The entire class failed miserably. Instead of re-evaluating her teaching method, she came in the next day and told us that our collective failure had spiritually drained her and that we all owed her a sincere written apology for being so difficult to teach. We had to spend the period writing apology letters to her. My driving ed teacher told us that the best way to handle a tyre blowout on the highway was to floor it. His theory was that the increased speed would create enough centrifugal force to press the flat tyre back into a round shape, allowing you to safely drive to the nearest exit. He was fired shortly after a parent complained. A professor of ancient history was convinced that the pyramids were built by dinosaurs, not aliens, dinosaurs. He argued that the T-Rex's powerful legs and tiny arms made them the perfect natural cranes for lifting heavy stones. He showed us crudely drawn diagrams to prove his point.